Transformation. I was talking today with someone at length, and they asked me if it's on purpose that the word thresholds and the concept of thresholds appears in a lot of the work that I've been doing lately, certainly work that we've done in collaboration. And I said that it's funny that in Germany, because of the Biennale, that word sort of took on a life of its own to the point where it was like, stop talking about thresholds, right? But my work isn't explicitly focused on thresholds, nor is yours, unless we see thresholds as just another word for transformation. Or transition, or becoming other spaces, other things, other people, other possibilities. And so that's what I see when I think of the word transformation. It's connected to thresholds, but it's really about just, and even just in collaboration, pushing each other and pushing yourself as a writer, thinker, artist to go far beyond the expectations of your culture, your history, and your past. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's also like this catalytical, if that word exists.
It does.
Yeah. Whatever you want to call it, energy or force or I don't know, phenomenon that like you don't even need to transform towards. You're just in a situation where things do change and do develop or do grow or do happen.
Yeah.
And then if they just continue happening, they also transform.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily a change from A to B or to C, or the expectation or the urge to make things change from A to B to C, but just like being aware of like things are moving, they're in dialogue.
We're at a time now politically, though, I've seen for some years that whether you're on the left or the right, or you're religious fundamentalist or experimental, etc., when things get politically and culturally chaotic or dangerous or threatening, no matter who we are, we retreat into known modes of being and culture. We retreat into things that are familiar and identifiable. We retreat and run away from transformation because transformation requires trust in who you are to survive, right? And it requires that you trust that what happens on the other side is a space that you can function in. And when it comes to racial politics, I think a lot of elites, regardless of your color, but certainly the Western world, is more afraid of transformation because there's a fear that you won't be on top anymore. Whereas a lot of people are eager to embrace transformation because it means you won't be on top anymore, right? So that's why transformation is just so politically difficult, but why it's important for someone like you and someone like me to engage it openly, to say that we trust ourselves to survive, and we trust the world that we can make together through it, right? And we're try to operate without that fear that is rooted in, or that pushes you back into what you consider stable, known, and traditional, because those things are actually gone already.
Yeah, there's also forced transformation, which very often is adaptation in disguise. Whereas you can actually counter transform somehow against the expectation of adapt or apply to, or accept changing rules and changing whatever behaviors, or it's an interesting concept also because it is also a commercialized and capitalized, or whatever the proper word for that is, a term, like you're supposed to adjust working conditions, financial, economic conditions. You're like, everything's always in flux. We know that, like Pantare is like the sales slogan for all the bigger whatever tech and service companies there are out there, which is like, But in the end, you can see the stereotype you're supposed to adapt towards, and it's not a transformation that's open and experimental in nature, and something that isn't stopping because it is the force that makes you transform, or it's like that, whatever, that curiosity or that need to renegotiate yourself in connection to your, environment all the time.
Yeah.
But to arrive somewhere for a certain moment where you, the better, whatever, citizen, consumer, yeah.
Well, you remind me, though, that I should probably emphasize, though, that I take this for granted, but when a lot of people, certainly in the worlds that I come from, think about transformation, they think of coercion. They think of colonial, extractive, they think of transformation as this sort of forced thing. And the difficulty for me is that is true. They are forced, unpleasant, unequal, exploitative forces, but they still transform, right? And the idea that you react to it by somehow wishing it away or going back to something you were before, that's what I push against that, right? Even though things are acting on us and forcing us to transform, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't transform.
So transforming the transformation.
Absolutely. Appropriating the appropriation.
Covered it. We're going in reverse. I'm still practicing reverse talking.
No, the thing about thresholds, though, there was that moment in Venice when the political figures came to do their talk at the pavilion, the German political figures, whoever I don't remember who they were, but they represented the state, and they came to talk about it. And all of them did their little speeches. And almost every one of them in every other sentence used the word threshold. With Israel we are now, and with Gaza threshold, and it was good and it was fine, but it reminded me of how easy it is, back to the whole thing you said about capitalism and how it imposes and structures meaning. It was real clear that it's dangerous to have a word so perfectly attuned to how people are thinking, because the word thresholds. And then I went back to the States. And I went to a bunch of different art shows at different museums, and they were called thresholds. Not because they knew about this. I don't believe that's what it was. I just think that there was something in the air right now where people are thinking about thresholds. But I worry that thresholds for them was a way for them to talk about transition and transformation without talking about what it requires to transition and transform. Thresholds can bring attention just to the doorway, the space, right? And it marks a clear before, after, inside, outside. But the real concept behind it is what happens when you move through, right? What happens to Germany, like when those folks were talking about the threshold, we are at a threshold. You could say that and make it seem like I have stopped at the door. Right? It's not we're moving through, we are changing. It could be like, we've gotten to this point. Let's just stop here now and think about what it means. That's what most people were doing, I thought. So that's why the word thresholds, I'm glad to see it, but it could be a stop that prevents you from understanding that that's not what it's about, the process of moving through and being transformed in space,
I mean, technically a threshold can also be something that you have to surpass to get to a certain point, or even like enter whatever a certain state of being recognized or appearing, or and technically if a signal isn't passing a threshold, it can't even be registered.
It's a sonic thing too, yeah? The signal, the threshold, and hearing.
It's when the gate, another term, opens.
Yes.
It's when, a signal can actually pass through. A signal can be too low, but you can adjust the threshold, which is really interesting. It's what I always liked about thresholds. You can turn them so low that they basically don't exist. Yeah. And in signal flow, it's an interesting thing. You can either really crank them up, and you can also cut certain properties of signals by leveling up the threshold. So you can have like a very sharp and very attacky signal when you like crank up the threshold, and you can have a very smooth and even like noisy, obscure, diffuse signal if you like keep the threshold very low.
One of the things that I started doing before I even thought of it as a practice, with field recorders, or back in the day of the little Tascam 4-track thing, in Nigeria or Jamaica, I remember, because music was so loud all over the place all the time, I really enjoyed the moment, trying to find that moment where the music you heard was becoming something else. For me, that was a threshold, right? Because I thought, what if as a composer, I'm not a composer, but back then when I was young, what if as a composer, you didn't create new music? All you did was you listened to, and you wait until it was alien and not what it was, and then that becomes your music. And I've never forgotten that.
Yeah, I can very much relate to that. So there you go. Like, you can adjust a threshold to record whatever transformation you want with a capturing device that you can actually use like an instrument. So you could have a signal come in and like constantly change, readjust, or just mess around with the threshold. So actually that's a nice way to make a capturing device an instrument. But probably it is, even if you're not aware of it. Like anything that captures anything is probably as much an instrument or a tool for virtuosity and playfulness. And you can even pretend fishing and you have like, there's nothing on the hook, right? Just like throwing. I remember we were with Dynamische Akustische Forschung, we were in Norway, and then the group had rented a house. It was for a performance during Ultima Festival in Oslo, a new music festival. But anyway, the group lived together next to like a huge lake. Was it even the sea? I think it was a lake. And it was this, whatever, old house. And at some point I found a fishing rod, but we had like no, I forgot, what's the thing you put on the hook? The
worm?
Yeah, the worm. And it's
bait.
Like the bait, yeah. There was no bait. Like. So, but I really enjoyed throwing the hook, which was heavy. I think it did have a blinker. I don't know if that word exists. It's like a little shiny, shimmery thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's supposed to attract fish. So it had that. Okay. But I really enjoyed like throwing it into the water and pulling it back and just like remembering the act of throwing a rod, because it's something I did with my grandfather. So yeah, just like having a capturing device and not even capturing anything.
There are people in the States, you probably know this, but I always find those people funny and interesting who go fishing not to catch fish. They go to do what you're doing. It's meditation, it's reflection. But I guess that's what's being captured, yeah?
But that's a good point. That's something I haven't, true. Yeah.
You're capturing that moment and that history and that relationship with your father, etc. Right? It's like when I got into field recording, not even knowing it was called that, it was just recording things, not because they were for any purpose, not even because I wanted to archive them, especially now. So it's so much stuff is hard to keep, but just to record the process. It's as if the capturing devices, I remember liking the fact that they forced me to pay attention to the moment that I was using them for. And then after that, you could delete the thing, throw it away. But just that moment, the capturing devices, yes, you could capture stuff and sounds, etc. I'm sure there are people who want the word capturing to be removed from this, right? But that moment of attention and bringing attention to it, that's always been more important to me. So I guess it's like the fishing, but it's like listening, that act of listening, and then when you're done, you just delete it.
Yeah, it's quite ritualistic, because the idea of capturing anything is weird already, because you think you capture the whole context of the moment and like this kind of the mindset that you're in, but capturing it's a weird term, actually.
It is a weird term, right? It's a weird term, but I'm thinking too, though, if we think about what you do and what I do, or the wider range of practices, I think we want to listen better, and we want other people to learn how to listen better. And these devices sometimes force you to listen better, learn how to listen better.
Yeah, it's true. They're kind of basically they're focus devices rather than capturing devices.
Boy, yeah, focusing devices.
Mm-hmm.
Back to capitalism, we could have a whole line of instruments that are just called focusing devices. I think a lot of people would buy that. We just make sure they're bio and green. This is a focusing machine, not a recorder.
Focusing device, easy to use, low threshold.
So there's a term that I don't like, although I respect the tradition and I study the tradition, and that is spoken word. Spoken weird is very cool, actually. I haven't thought of that one. But for a long time, I was trying to find out what to call. If I am going to more consciously embark upon this, it's going to be called something different. And the term that I used for a while, only because I just wanted something else, I said unsung word.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I like it anymore, but it was just not spoken word, unsung word, right?
I think what spoken word basically does is make a clear distinction between a written word and a spoken word, and how words come to life or start having their own life through the interpretation of being part of a conversation, of like some individual expression in a certain given moment, or also the aspect of the potential of misunderstanding. That is quite that quality is quite, that risk, that potential is quite high in the field of spoken word, whereas in the field of a written word, it is, I would say, more difficult and more unlikely that the word will deliberately be used to be either misinterpreted or not be understood, or like kind of not even be rhythmical or not have some sort of function. And in that sense, I think the spoken word gives space, it gives a certain freedom to the concept of word and also in consequence language, because I think already in this conversation or game I sense how difficult language is to describe, like these complexities of experience and wanting to convey experience, and then friendship, and knowing that certain things you don't have to speak so clearly about, they're kind of like given, or you've experienced them already, so you know what you're speaking about, and then you want to like convey to an abstract audience, or like two friends who sit across the table and who've probably had different experiences, and so you want to like put all of this into some explanation that you use language for. But the spoken word kind of gives you a bit more I don't know, maybe I'm romantic here, but it adds a certain playfulness. You can add melody, you can hold back, you can breathe in word, you can breathe out word while you say a word. There's a lot of variety in how you add pronunciation or rhythm.
Well, what you're basically saying is why spoken word is something I still study and pay attention to. It's what happens to language in the context of performance, right? It's performance. And I respect that. The problem for me, of course, is that so much spoken word isn't weird enough anymore. It's become very conventionalized. Even me, I have to fight myself, because it's easy to look at the audience and know, okay, I should go, my soul, my spirit speaks to the, right? I could easily do that, and you can see the audience going, yes, yes, yes. But that's not what you want. And I make it very clear that I'm not a poet, although I care about poetic meanings, right? What I want is to be able to do a spoken thing that is poetic, but also essay, nonfiction, not a poem. Because my mentors have all been poets, and I respect them, right? But in this kind of format, as a lecture, performance, kind of audio, as we're still trying to figure out what to call these things. A poet would have it easier because the poetry is doing something else. When I'm doing what I want to do, it's about linguistic and conceptual expansion. But because I believe I'm rooted in research, a poet doesn't have to speak facts. I want to be able to speak rooted in actual facts that have poetic and that convey in a different way. But it's important for there to be details that are saying, this is fact, not just feeling, or this is feeling rooted in fact. And so it's commitment to expansion, but not the kind of expansion that expands away from research, you know?
You'd rather fail in the attempt to convey factuality than failing in trying to convey abstraction and the new, the unheard, the unpredictable.
The thing is, as you said, there's a beauty and a rhythm in the sounds, and you can get carried away with it, and it's very helpful, and it generates different kinds of meanings. I don't have an answer as to what it is I'm trying to convey, because I want to convey so many different things. That's why working in this kind of format, I could say, there's a poet, and the poet said this in her poetry. Then you can deliver the poetry and perform that, right? But it's also rooted in these sort of histories that you can convey it poetically, but you want people to understand that I'm not making this up. This is not just beauty. It's rooted in things. There's information that I would like to find ways of conveying. But I also know that there are people who aren't necessarily interested in conveying information. Language is it does a lot more than just conveying information.
That's probably the only thing that is really kind of lets you down if you feel somebody's being lazy and hasn't even tried. Because you might fail conveying a fact or the proper information as much as you might fail in presenting something new, something unprecedented, something that will just blow people's minds because it's suddenly there and nobody has ever heard or seen anything like that. But then knowing the cynicism of knowing that none of that even exists and that we're all whatever, everything has been there before, and maybe there's a bit of mathematics you can combine or recombine, but still it would be predictable because it was following an algorithm or it was following some sort of rule. And then that's, I don't know, sorry, I don't want to make a conclusion, but that's just where I'm losing it immediately. If I get that sense, it's...
But that's actually, for me, it's humbling, but it's like with sound in general, it's kind of endlessly expanding. Not just you're trying to expand and explore, it's also doing it on its own. So you can get frustrated and disappointed, but it's all bigger than who we are, you know. That's why one has to be humbled. I don't have a fixed answer as to, for example, what I'm trying to convey, right? There are different things at different times, and I would like to know the better way to do it each time. Right?
So my biography that I'll write about you will be At Least He Tried.
Better than The Fucker Gave Up.
Oh. That would be mean.
That would be mean?
That would be really mean. That would be the meanest. What's when you're at somebody's funeral and you give the last speech, or how do you call it?
Eulogy.
No, is it an
obituary? Sorry.
Obituary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, obituary.
Yeah, that would be a mean obituary. The motherfucker gave up.
You know, it's so funny you say that though. I'm not going to say any names right now, but there's somebody I loved very, very, very much. One of my great influences, right? And I actually just got confirmation that something I wrote, not an obituary, but something like that, for a very prestigious place. It finally got accepted a year and a half after he died. Today they said, okay, we're publishing it, right? And I didn't say that because he was such a wonderful figure, right? But the motherfucker gave up. He gave up, and it could have been because capitalism, or he didn't want to work in the industry, and he got frustrated because of the way they wanted him to compromise, or it became, the technology became more the focus than it was the art. I mean, there are a lot of different reasons, I'm sure, and I talked with him a lot whenever I spent time with him, but the conclusion is that at some point he just said, fuck it, and he gave up. And other people who his collective and the people he worked with, they didn't, right? Now, their work may have gotten bad. Some of it did. And some of them began working for television or whatever, etc. But he gave up, and I couldn't help but think that he spent the last 20 years of his life just coming up with justifications for the fact that he just gave up.
So if you give up very late in life, there's a chance that you cannot cause too much harm.
If you give up after you've done stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
That's called retiring.
Yeah. Okay. But if you start getting cynical or just like create nonsense, just like confusing people's attention, or I don't know, just like putting things out there and they don't really mean anything because you don't mean anything with them. I think that's
he didn't want
sad.
to do that.
Okay.
So I guess there's something positive there. He didn't want to do that.
So if he didn't want to do that, did he refrain from publishing or producing?
Completely.
Okay, so there's a certain radicalism in this.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so we have like the motherfucker gave up, at least they tried. And the other thing is, I tried but failed.
That might end up being all of our... Because then we don't know what success really means, right? I don't mind he tried but failed. I don't want that. So this is not me telling you what to put.
Okay, so maybe we can go with still trying.
Still, what's that great line from Beckett? Try, fail, fail better.
No, that's dinner for one.
What do you mean?
That is like a New Year's Eve sketch thing.
Samuel Beckett, that's one of his famous lines. Try, fail, try again, fail better. By the way, I always thought if I were to start like a rock band at this stage in life, it would be called the Fail Betters. Is that not a great name?
Yeah, for like a hardcore band or
Yes,
something?
the guitars, it'd have to have guitars.
Yeah, kind of in you feel better. If you failed good, you didn't fail, no?
But you fail better each time.
This fails good would be my band name.
This fails good. Did we talk about this whole art project where it's just names?
Yeah, all the time.
Just names. Space. Yeah.
The word that's coming back, right?
What, reverb?
Mm-hmm.
Coming back, where did it go?
I don't know. How can it re?
The verb, coming back. I mean, reverb for me, certainly one thing that I don't know if was she there when we were recording those echoes, those in Nuremberg and recording basically reverb underneath in these what do you call them? These tunnels or these pipes, right?
You mean on the Nazi rally grounds?
No.
Where?
Before that.
Before that
There was one time
there was Baden-Baden.
Oh, Baden-Baden. There was
right?
Baden-Baden,
Yeah.
but then we also then did it in Nuremberg.
Okay.
Right. So you were at the Nuremberg, but not the Baden-Baden, right? But well, I was going to say that about the Nuremberg next because it started from my first trip to Baden-Baden. And I remember sitting there with you and the folks in the group, DAF. I was thinking, wow, it's very possible that I found this group of people that we just want to sit around and listen to space. Just that.
Yeah, which is interesting because the idea of reverberation is really like a reconsideration. It's something like you can examine something that is actually unexaminable. Whereas like the artificial reverb is usually something that just makes it more solid. It just emphasizes something that's there. It's artificial reverb makes things sound bigger or gives them more presence, or can also create a blur so things kind of come together somehow in a big enough psychological space.
Yeah.
But the reverb in real space is a very complex thing, and it is like a way to actually adapt or sense what's around you, like what we call space, which is usually defined by its limitations, but that's not really the space that we think of, because the space that we think of is an unlimited examination of environment or Umwelt, but not, like, oh, the space is this big and it has these properties and then we fix it and then we can rebuild it. But reverb is often used in that sense, The lengths, the decay time of like the Taj Mahal, blah blah building with like 6 seconds something. That's the reverb time. You go like, this is totally insane. Like, it totally depends on where you are in the space and which signal you're playing, how loud, and just to like define spaces by their reverb time. So I don't know. I find it pretty mean, but
Well, what you're describing though is why I'm so obsessed with and would like to be better at focusing on convolution reverb. Because convolution reverb, oh, I want the Taj Mahal, I'm going to download it as a plugin or something, But I want us to be able to use that kind of reverb for historical purposes, for recollection, to remember for other generations or for other cultures. It's not just, oh, here's a picture of the lake where the fish was being fished, right? But the soundscape of it, I think convolution reverb is really interesting to me as a way of supplementing historical awareness and cultural memory. And so I'm very, very obsessed with it. I just want to spend more time. Plus it just sounds better, right? But for at least to me. And it's funny, one of the projects that I've started my whole thing, the echolocution thing, was supposed to be recording, going to West Africa and recording the dungeons where all the slaves in Africa, before they came to the West, all of them got filtered through a series of dungeon castles off the coast of West Africa, because the ships couldn't come to the shore, but they could come to these little islands right off the shore. And in these islands were dungeons, and some of them have, what they call the gates of no return, because most of the people who became slaves, their ancestors all went through these gates to get on these ships, thresholds, I suppose. What's interesting for me is that they all spent their last night on the continent of Africa in these dungeons that are still there. I want to be able to capture the soundscape of those dungeons for historical purposes. Not everyone can go back there and listen to them, etc. And maybe what we did in Nuremberg, my goal was to try doing that first. You remember, my goal was to go back to West Africa, and then the detour to Nuremberg became a wonderful way to learn more from you and from your students and everyone. But it's funny, just 2 days ago, one of my former students sent me a message. He said, "Do you know this record?" And I said, "No." And I looked at it. It was, Roberta Flack. You know Roberta Flack. She's dead now. She's one of the greatest R&B singers. First time ever I saw your face. Right?
I don't think I know it.
Maybe you know the Fugees. They sampled her a lot, but she was one of the greatest R&B soul singers of her generation. Truly fantastic. But there's a record. She recorded some songs in the dungeons.
That she performed?
But it's on this record.
Oh, wow.
And that blew my mind. Wow. She went into the dungeons in 1972 and recorded in that dungeon. Now, I would be afraid to do that, to do something creative artwork there, but maybe for her. So I immediately ordered it. When I get back home, I will listen to it to see if I can get the sound of the space there, you know? Because a lot of African Americans go back to this in the same way that we go to the Nazi sites and, you know, you go to the camps, etc. A lot of people go and they go into the dungeons and they have transformative emotional experiences. But I want to capture those sounds because those castles are still there and that reverb is still there.
So in that sense, then reverb would really be more like a reverbalization, a rephrasing, a recoming at terms, or like reconsidering.
Of that history, absolutely. And what does it do for us to do so with sound, or the sound of a space, you know? So yeah, there's some weird histories around it too. I might end up writing something much more elaborate because there was a time when the Michael Jackson and his family wanted to go and turn them into like casinos and as a way to get people to come back and say, oh, it's your history, it's your heritage, but it's the capitalist future and you know that kind of thing. It didn't work out, but the very fact that they thought about that is really weird to me, right? But people don't know what to do with those spaces in the way that people don't know what to do with the Nuremberg spaces. Which is why so much of that project for me and the other people we brought into the mix was about genocide and, you know, and space and reverberation, right? Which by the way, and I get what brings my attention to this, of course, growing up in Jamaica is dub. Dub was all about reverb and echo, and it was impossible to not think about that as being about manipulating space or reconsidering space.
What's really interesting about dub, though, is that dub, similar to thresholds in recording technology, means you cut out. You actually take something away or you overwrite something. And I think that's interesting too, because we refer to dub, or we relate dub to echo and spaciousness, and you know, like having less vocals or just like fragments of vocals of an original track, and you know, like the drums coming in and cutting out. But it's basically also, it's really about like taking something out. And I think to dub is just a short version of overdub.
Yeah,
that's what the full term actually means.
Well, that, but also there's a debate. Like David Katz would argue with you, because he argues with me about this, the reggae historian. Because I came at it dub coming from double.
Double?
To double a track.
But that would be to double, but that wouldn't be OU?
OU?
Double? D-O-U?
But it's just, it turned into the word dub. Let's dub it. Let's double it.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that was the Jamaicans. David doesn't think that's the Jamaicans called it that. I think maybe it was the rockabilly 50s, because they were all about that reverb too, right? Slap back and all of that it was to dub something. But
the thing is, when you had limited capacities in terms of like space on a tape or studio capacities to record multi-track, you would have to do dubs and overdubbing and copying to save tape space. So you would like put two tracks together and record them onto a third track, so you would have two tracks available again. The quality of the recording is losing, but you could also, that's kind of like work, that's how I understand it, but what do I know? I'm a digital...
Well,
idiot.
Like I said, David and other people argue about this. No one really knows. It's one of these, or it could be all of them, because it's a bunch of Jamaican guys who are hearing it from all over and doing different things with it, right? But as a digital guy, though, there's a word I want to know what you thought. If I were to put a word down, I invented a word years ago that is kind of a personal embarrassment. We can now, people like you can now have for example, the thresholds piece, how you would take a lot of the echo and the reverb and reverse it, and it would start first, right? Which is something that the folks in Jamaica always wanted to do, but they couldn't do it analog. Eventually they started working on it with digital. And so I wonder, what does the word preverberation mean? I was afraid that the card was going to say preverberation. Rhythm is repetition, that's for sure. They certainly have a relationship to each other.
You see, that is the thing that I'm not sure about. I think rhythm became repetition in like how we formalize it, but I would say rhythm is coming from it's dialogue. It is call and response. Rhythm is hitting something and then getting a response and then responding to that. So it's basically a chain of events. But the repetition part, which does not neglect this, but repetition kind of implies or connotates metric, a steady pulse, a metronome, a BPM. But rhythm, I think, is really more a thing of like you keep things running. You say something, I say something, or I hit something and somebody else responds hitting something again. Or I myself hit a drum and hit it again because I liked the sound or because the first sound made me like. So each hit is different.
I hear what you're saying. The word repetition suggests imitation, that each sound is a version of the one before. And you're right that that's not necessarily the core of rhythm, right? It could be a bunch of different sounds, right? Of course. But the repetition part for me is, I would agree with that. That word doesn't work, but marks in time, right? And they don't have to be 4/4. They don't have to be, it's still rhythm, even if it's in completely different ways, but it's marks in time that we register in the dialogue and in the conversation.
Yeah, okay, so kind of a Lefebvre kind of idea of rhythm analysis as like certain events seen from a certain perspective are put in perspective, in relation.
Yeah.
So
in relation.
Right? You make those events create, I don't know, you see an algorithmic connection between these events. Where because I come from drumming actually, or from making rhythms, or learning rhythms, I realized that each time I tried to repeat, it just sounded horrible. And each time I enjoyed every stroke, and I was like in a flow, and I didn't even realize, and I don't realize drumming, it's something is happening. But when you deliberately try to, what you just said, imitate, or stay in line, stay in tact, it becomes edgy and weird. Like as a good drummer, I would say each stroke you make, you would have to think, is it really necessary? I mean, sounds a bit dogmatic, but you can have like this kind of, and it's just like everything's like a machine, and it just comes because you have to, follow some sort of rule, some set of rules. But that isn't what rhythm to me is. It's not a set of rules. You could say, like, from a rhythm analysis point of view, there is, from a certain perspective, a structure. And you could say, I can see these things belong together. There is a rhythm to them. But the core of the rhythm is the urge to speak.
But you agree that they are in relationship to other urges to speak, right? other voices,
Yeah.
including your own other voices.
This is what actually makes rhythms mostly interesting, is when several voices come together and they have their way of responding to what is happening. So you could have a rhythm that even consists of like different speed meters and different, even different concepts of like what kind of rhythm is there right now.
I'm laughing now because just as you speak, I'm like, I can imagine somebody hearing our conversation and going, now I understand Mouse on Mars.
Did you just have an epiphany?
Well, I've even written about this, that, you folks you were algorithmic before algorithms. But just in the sense that you see rhythm as intent, desire, and so you have a broader sphere of rhythm that is really about voices and beings in relationship to each other. Mm-hmm. I think most people possibly have a more limited vision of rhythm where it has to click into some sort of shape that's recognizable. And one thing we have in common there, for me, the problem with rhythm, why dub was so revolutionary for me as a kid, was to break it up, right? The problem with rhythm is that for a lot of people, rhythm is just a metaphor for community. Mm-hmm. For harmony, for syncing, grooving together, right? And so they're unlikely to want to break away from rhythm because that's chaos and solitude and disconnection, right? What you're trying to argue is that, no, there's something bigger and broader outside of that, right? Which I agree, but that requires a trust.
Yeah, it requires a trust, and maybe also a little bit of experience that it is the case that you can break a rhythm and yet you can still catch up or be still in it, although you don't even notice. And at some point you realize, God, there's a rhythm that I can't even escape, like everything you do, the way you speak, the spoken word, your body movements, your even the temperature of your brain producing thought. There is rhythm to that.
Yeah, and back to the algorithmic perspective, there's the question of what algorithms and what technology seems to promise, and it's mostly all promise, is ways of stepping back further and further and further and just seeing actual rhythms that just click into place that are beyond our capacity to see them, right? Sometimes
it takes a while to see that something could be clicking or has been clicking, and you weren't even aware, and it's really a perspective thing, very much.
Starts happening when you're 30.
When you're 30?
When you're 30, you start going, oh, wait a minute, there's a pattern that, it's a bad one, but it is still a pattern. You have to have the perspective, right?
Pattern recognition.
Yeah.
That would be the next keyword.
I'm afraid.
No. No, but there's still something which I find interesting, because if you have a clear sense of like how a rhythm is proceeding, if you get the sense of the metrics or the pattern, actually, if you recognize the pattern, it's in that moment, at least for me, it's like becoming absolutely uninteresting to continue the pattern.
I totally get that.
It's like you can be even in an interesting rhythm, but the moment you realize the pattern, it gets boring and there's no reason to continue the rhythm. So if you were thinking metrically, you could say like a snippet of like 2 seconds or even half a second can be enough to understand a rhythm.
I think about...
If it is a metric, conceptual, algorithmic idea of repetition, repeating a certain pattern.
I relate to this as a writer because my mentors, poets, etc., they feel more comfortable with what you're describing, right? Not all of them, but the ones that I've worked with, Nate Mackey and these wonderful, wonderful poets. But I realized that at a certain point I make decisions to honor them and that trust they have that rhythm will just go where it goes, right? But then to think about, but what about audience? Because the question of audience is also a question of meter, structure, predictability, etc. And I don't want to compromise too much, but then there's certain things, for example, in writing a memoir, which is about recollection and putting a pattern on the past, right? Mm-hmm. Or Roberta Flack singing an R&B song inside of this horrific space, there's that kind of familiarity that is also rhythm. And so I don't go as far as certain people who just make it all familiarity and predictable. But there is something about producing a narrative and using words and sounds in ways that are not working according to meter and rhyme, etc. But every moment targeting these moments of familiarity that just boom, right? That for me is dub.